Hey there, comic book fans. It's Rusty again with Collector Auctions, and here I am in the car on a beautiful Sunday morning heading up to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania for the Philly FanExpo. Now, I went to the FanExpo last year for the first time. They had the Ghost Machine artist there, and I was especially excited to get to meet Brian Hitch, who had done all those wonderful Ultimates pages that I got signed last year. Well, this year, I didn't even wait to see what the lineup was going to be. I had such a great time. I went ahead and bought my ticket last year when they first went on sale, not knowing who was going to be here. And when they put that initial list out of artists that were going to be there, and that's all I'm really wanting to see is the comic book creators, not worried about voice actors and celebrities and anything like that. I wasn't that impressed. And I almost considered at one point just eating the ticket and not worrying about coming up here. But then they had the second round of artists that were coming up here, and there was a lot of great names on there. But most of all, the two biggest names on that list were Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. And man, that was awesome. I couldn't believe getting another chance to get to see Scott Snyder after all his visits to Third Eye Comics. But the big one for me was Greg Capullo, and I was super excited about coming up here for that. And here I was a day before coming up, right before, as I'm filming this, the day before last night, I'm checking out the list and I'm double checking the artists for the final time to make sure that I've got all my books pulled for all the artists, that I didn't overlook anybody. And I looked down on Scott Snyder's listing on the website, and it says Saturday only. And I'm going, oh, are you kidding me? Did I just miss this, or was that a change? I don't know. I could have missed it. I could have overlooked that, because if you go into each listing of every celebrity, every artist, every guest, it does say what days are going to be there. And on most every one of them, it definitely says all 3 days for just about everyone that I could see. Well, with the exception of Scott Snyder. And I'm going, well, it's not the end of the world. Scott Snyder is going to be coming back to Third Eye Comics here in June for probably the fourth time in the last 8 months. So that's not the end of the world. But Greg Capullo was there, and he had him listed for all 3 days. No big deal. I had all my books pulled, ready to go. And then last night at the very end, I was just doing a final check, and I go down the list, and I can't find Greg Capullo. And I'm going, wait a minute. He was right here on the list. In fact, he was one of the top two. Him and Snyder were the first ones listed in the list. So I go down to the very bottom of the page where they have canceled guest. And there it is, Greg Capullo canceled. Now, as I said, this was late Saturday night, and I'm wondering if he actually came to the con at all. I don't know. I know that they had a paid experience with Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo at, I believe it was 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock last night. I have a feeling that they knew all along when they moved that event. Originally it was going to be on Sunday, and then they moved it to Saturday. I think they knew all along that Greg Capullo was going to bail after that, and they just didn't tell anybody. And after the event, they put him as canceled. And I'm a little pissed about that. I'm still going up. I'm just not going to get those books signed. Again, I could have missed the Scott Snyder thing, but the Greg Capullo thing, I think, really feels like a bait and switch. So I'm going to go up. I'm a little salty about the whole thing, but I do have a lot of great books to get signed by a lot of other comic book creators. So I'm still going to go up, still going to try to have a good time. I'm definitely going to have a good time. I'm just not going to get those Capullo books signed like I wanted to. And we'll go from there. You know me, guys. I'm going to film as much as I can. I'll come back, and then we'll do a show and tell of anything that I ended up buying, because there's definitely going to be some comic book dealers there. And I'll show off everything that I do get signed. So stay tuned, enjoy the video, and I will be right back. right, guys, I just finished up at the Fan Expo here in Philadelphia, and I had a great time. I got to meet a lot of great artists, and I got a lot of books signed. So when I get home, I'm going to do a little show and tell. So stay tuned, and I'll be right back.
One eternity later.
All right, guys, I made it back home after having a great time at the Philly Fan Expo. It was a great time. It was a great con. A lot of great creators, and despite the fact that Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo did not show up on Sunday, and apparently they weren't there the whole weekend from what I understand. I ran into another fellow who collects autographs that I know, and he said they weren't there the whole weekend. And I don't know if that's 100% true, but I know at the very last minute, as I said earlier in the video, that I found out late Saturday night that Greg Capullo was not going to be there on Sunday. Well, they had an event where it was a Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo experience where you could go, and I think it was from like 7 to 9 maybe, where you could go and get to meet them, and you get some exclusive items. You can get 3 autographs each from each of them, and it was a paid event. And they had originally had that on a Sunday. Then they moved it to Saturday night. And when Saturday night came along and I'm sitting there working on my list, I was trying to print out a list of all the artists I was going to try to get autographs from. And that's when I noticed that Capullo was not on the list anymore. I'm going, something's wrong. And that's when I double checked, and he was put into the canceled guest. And Scott Snyder's days that he was going to be there was only going to be on Saturday. And I didn't notice any of that ahead of time. In fact, earlier in the day, I wasn't really checking Snyder. I was checking Capullo because that's who I really wanted to get a lot of books signed by. He was still listed for all 3 days of the week. He was there earlier on that Saturday. And I figured that once that event happened Saturday night, then it was going to be changed. And they said, well, he canceled. They weren't, and they didn't tell anybody. I think that's the thing. I think that they knew that he wasn't going to be there, and they didn't want to tell anybody in lieu of losing people coming to the con. That's what I really think. And when I ran into my fellow collector, he said that they weren't there the whole weekend. So I don't know exactly what was going on. But I do know that without the two of them there, it did kind of open up my time to be devoted to a lot of the other different creators. And that's kind of what I did. And I just kind of started going down the list. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull out the books that I got signed. They're not necessarily in the order that I got them signed, but I'm kind of looking at it and like, yeah, maybe it's kind of close. It's really more like how I rebagged and boarded all these books so they're protected now. But let's just go through this, and I'll start with Erica Schultz, who is a writer. She is writing the new Rat City from Image there with Spawn. She also wrote the Black Widow Venomous one-shot, and I had several copies of this with some really good cover artists. So I ended up getting a couple of these, all 3 of these signed, in hopes to be able to get the cover artist eventually on there. And she's also writing Laura Kinney Wolverine, and this was not the main cover. This was that J. Scott Campbell cover that I really liked. So I pulled that out, and this is a good example of somebody that if I had went and got Scott Snyder and especially Greg Capullo, and all of these are paid autographs, and 98% of the autographs that I got were paid autographs, a lot of my money would have went to Greg Capullo, to be quite honest, and some of it would have went to Scott Snyder, and I probably would have cut down on as many autographs I got from some of the other artists. But in this case, I ended up getting a few more than I normally would. So in this case, I got all of these from Erica Schultz. I also got my big Marvel book signed, my 5 Fabulous Decades of Marvel book that I've been collecting since 1992 when I first went up to Philadelphia for the Comics Fest back in the day when I was getting some of those classic 60s and 70s Marvel artists. And we're talking like the Ramitas and Sal Buscema and guys like that, George Tuska. I mean, there was some really good Silver Age artists back in the day that I really started working on back 92, 93, 94 in that era. And I've been working on this book for, we're talking 33 years at this point. So that book's almost as old as what Marvel was when they put that book out. Well,
I'm continuing with that book, and I'm not pulling it out for this show because it is becoming a little, the spine has kind of broken away from the book a little bit. And it's a little awkward to hold it here. So I'm not even going to show that at this point. But as I said, I ended up getting Erica Schultz in that book, as well as a lot of the other artists. And I will mention those artists as I go along, who I got in the book. But I did have one more Erica Schultz book, and she had written the Hallows Eve. This is the, I guess, I thought it was at one of the free comic book days, but it's not. It's the Hallows Eve, the Big Night. And I didn't know anything. I just picked up the book. I thought this was pretty cool. I'd get her to sign this maybe. And she said, hey, you need to go over and get Ben Harvey to sign the cover. He had done the art to this. And I didn't even realize that. Even though I had pulled a bunch of Ben Harvey books to get signed, I didn't know that he had done this. So you can see his signature in in orange right here. So I ended up getting Ben Harvey, somebody I had talked about on this channel before. And I ended up getting several books from him. And his big thing right now is doing the covers to the One World Under Doom. So I did get a couple copies of issue number 1. And with him, I actually cut down on all the books. He's got a lot of great covers out there, but lesser books, I didn't feel like I needed a ton of autographs. But I did get a couple of these. One of these will probably be for sale in my eBay store. I may put up one of those for people who might want a copy of this. But the last one I ended up getting was this pretty cool Harley Quinn. This is issue number 42. And I think this is probably the best looking one. He did that in that green, and it looks really good. And then I actually got him in the book. He's somebody that I'd gotten last year and a couple years prior, and he'd only had a small bit of Marvel work even last year at this time, and I just didn't feel like he was worthy of the Marvel book yet, but he's been cranking out the covers, and you can see my buddy there. That's Lucky, who just came by. He's my buddy. I nicknamed him 2 Feet Pete because most of the time I'm in the house, he's about 2 feet away from me. So I call him 2 Feet Pete. Anyway, so I ended up getting that one done, and I saved some of the other books for maybe a future con. They weren't as important to me. But nonetheless, I got him in the Marvel book now because he's just been cranking out Marvel covers left and right. So I did that. So there's Ben Harvey. And I'm just going to keep reaching out. I've got this giant box of books, and I'm going to just kind of crank through these here. Now, somebody who was there, who's actually an editor, she's worked for Marvel. I think she's working at IDW these days, is Heather Antos. And you can go into other channels and hear people poo-poo on her like crazy. I don't know about the business side of things with her, but all I know is that she ended up being very nice and ended up recognizing me later in the day because I probably was crisscrossing the comic book artist area multiple times, and I was kind of recognizable with the big giant crate of books I was carrying behind me, and she even recognized me later on in the day. She said, oh, you're still going back and forth, right? But she seemed very nice, and I will say that goes a long way, despite what other channels say about her business acumen. I don't know. None of my business. But what I did do is I did get her to sign the Marvel book, as well as some pretty cool books here. This is Star Wars Princess Leia. She did the editing on these books. And this is a book I'd pulled for Terry Dotson, hopefully at some point, and Rachel as well at some point. And Mark Waid. What am I forgetting? Mark Waid actually wrote this. So I've got Waid shows up at cons all the time that I go to. I just haven't had to get anything from Mark Waid in a long time, to be quite honest. After doing a ton of Kingdom Come and Captain America, I really didn't need a lot of other Mark Waids at this point. But I really like these Princess Leia covers, especially the first 3 issues, and that's what I got. We got Heather Antos to sign here. Here's issue number 2. And issue number 3. You can see her signature right there. Right there. It did it sort of as a little word balloon. I'm seeing a lot of artists and creators do that these days. So these will get saved for Wade. These will definitely get saved for Terry Dotson and Rachel Dotson at some point. Really good stuff. And then I actually she did the editing for Image over doing Bug Wars by Jason Aaron. And you can see Jason Aaron's signature is already on that. He signed this at Third Eye Comics when they launched Bug Wars. And there's Antos right there. And then I did the other one I had from Jason Aaron was the Peach Momoko cover, and she also signed it. It's a little hard to see, there. But there's Jason Aaron, and there is Heather Antos. Anyway, good stuff. I mean, she was very nice. Again, I'm not worrying about the business side of things, but nonetheless, I had a good time meeting her. All right, next up was somebody that was right there actually between the two of them, between Erica Schultz and Heather Antos, was Corey Smith. And he's somebody I don't really know a lot about, but it turns out he's been doing a lot of great books, and including some things that I'd gotten signed earlier. So Ben Percy had just been down to Third Eye Comics, and if you guys watch the channel, watch that show where I show off all these books I got Ben Percy to sign. Of course, Ben Percy does a lot of Wolverine, and he does a lot of Ghost Rider. And when they relaunched Ghost Rider #1 a few years ago, got this right here. Corey Smith is the artist on the interior of this right there, and it's really hard to see. Right there is Percy, and right below that, well, you can't. It's hard to see. In person, you can see it better. There's Corey Smith right there, and of course, I've got 2 copies of that. Again, that's one of those. One of these will be for me. One of these will be for the eBay store. I also have the variant right here, and this one's going to be saved for Heroes Con. You've got Todd Nauck. How do you say it? Nauck. I never know how to say his name. Anyway, that's getting saved for Heroes Con, where he's going to be at. So I end up with hopefully 3 signatures on that one. And hopefully Ryan Stegman will show up, because I've got the variant with all these different Ghost Riders on there by Stegman. And there's Corey Smith's autograph. Can you pick it up? I'm looking at the screen right there, and I can't even see it. And there's Ben Percy's down there. So these are all going to get saved for other artists. Well, the first 2 aren't, but the other ones are going to definitely get saved for other artists. But the other thing that Corey Smith has really been known for recently has been doing some Fantastic Four. So I ended up getting issue number 29 signed, and issue number 1 of Avengers Assemble right here. Steve Orlando's writing this. You've got this U cover. Pretty cool stuff. These 2 right here are really things I probably would have pulled back on. Again, I wouldn't have got these probably signed if I'd got all those Capullos signed. I know the money would have already been drained at this point. I probably would have pulled back a little bit more. But Steve Orlando is somebody that comes to Third Eye Comics occasionally, and this right here, hopefully we'll get a Ryan North signing, because he's writing the One World Under Doom as well. So I'm hoping that Ryan North will show up at a con and be able to add him to some of these books that you've already seen today. But Steve Orlando, like I said, is somebody who shows up at Third Eye. So, and he's doing a Scarlet Witch book, so I definitely will try to get this one signed as well. And there is Lucky back there again. Hey, kiddo. How you doing? All right, continuing on with other books. And again, one of my things is I love getting the books signed by multiple creators. Well, sometimes I've got a plan for it in the future. Well, Rodney Barnes was there, and of course you may know him as the writer for, and I guess creator of Philadelphia. I'm not as familiar with that but it is, I think, based out of Philadelphia, which is appropriate where we were. But he's also the writer on The Mandalorian, at least the first issue here. And so I ended up getting a couple copies of issue number 1 done, and these are going to go with me to Heroes Con. I think Barnes is going to be there as well. But the 2 of the other artists that are there, Story and Genty. Now, I don't even know. I just know that they are actually on the list down in Heroes. I'm not as familiar with them, but I'm real big about learning about new artists. I get Rodney Barnes I know about to sign this, but then I realized, wait a minute, I've got other creators that I can add to this. And I kind of like that. And that's how I get to know some of these artists for the first time, or an editor for the first time, is by adding them onto a book that I've already gotten signed or will want to get signed. He's over here now. But I also, besides issue number 1 here, or cover A, I actually got the toy version. Who does the covers on this? I cannot remember the artist who does these. It's pretty cool. It's a little harder to see. It's in blue right there. Boy, it really is hard to pick up. And then the photo version right there. That one actually looks really good. You can see the signature pop off really good. So those will all go to Heroes Con to get signed as well by the other creators. All right. Now we got somebody here that I added to a really good book. I'll save that one for the end, but it is Alvaro. Let me see if I can get this right. Alvaro Martinez Bueno. Of course, you guys know him as the artist that works with James Tynion on Nice House on the Lake and Nice House by the Sea. Well, Tynion I can get all the time because he comes to Third Eye Comics at least once a year for the last couple of years, if not more. So I had this book right here. This is actually issue number 1, Nice House on the Lake. This is the second print. And it's kind of cool because it looks like it's distressed and burning. And James Tynion had already signed it, so I got Bueno to sign that one. And this one's going to be a little harder to see. First issue of Nice House by the Sea. Same thing, James Tynion had signed it right there, and Bueno did it in black as well. So it is a little hard to see on that one. In person, it looks perfectly fine. But I'm anticipating James Tynion coming back to Third Eye. In fact, he is going to be coming there later in the year in October. So I ended up getting issue number 1 of Nice House on the Lake. This is the 3rd print. It's a little bit more distressed. So Bueno signed that right over here, and I'll save that for Tynion to sign right there, as well as this copy right here. Now, this looks like the regular cover A, but it's not. This is technically the Third Eye Comics exclusive for issue number 1. And I'd gotten several of these from Third Eye when it came out. I actually got some of these graded. So I do have some graded 9.8s of this in the collection. In fact, there are some of those are in the eBay store. But I had one more copy left over. It's not really gradable, but I went ahead and got him to sign this, and then I'll get Tynion to sign it later in the year. And that was it for that part of it. But the really big book, and this is the only book that I left in one of those blue window bags that I create to help protect the book when I go to a signing. And it's because it is a big square-bound book. It is one that I'm trying to take really good care of. And I've been adding a ton of creators, and it is Detective Comics 1000. It is the Frank Miller cover. Here, let me move these books out of the way there. And as you can see, there is a ton of autographs on this book. And I'm not sure which story Alvaro actually worked on in here, because I haven't taken this out for a while. But he's one of the artists on this book. And look at here, I'm going to go up. Look at all of those great creators. And I'll go through the list real quick. We've got James Tynion, Brian Michael Bendis, Steve Epting, Brad Anderson, the colorist, Peter Tomasi, Christopher Priest, Jeff Johns, Jason Fabok, Amanda Carner, Scott Snyder, Frank Miller. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll come back to the Frank Miller. And then we added Alvaro on there as well. I think that is... Actually, I've got my cheat sheet right here. Yeah, right now I'm up to 12 different autographs on there. And what I need, and I wrote this on the back. Oh, yeah, that's great, because they just added Alex Maleev to the Heroes Con. I saw him add that today. As of the filming today, they had just added Alex Maleev to the Heroes Con. And I was going, what books do I need to get him to sign? I don't think I've got any raw Infamous Iron Man #1s. Which Daredevils do I get signed? I'm trying to think. And then there dawned on me as I'm reading this, like, oh yeah, Alex Maleev did a story in here. He illustrated some of this. So I got to add him to this. And the other artist on here, Tom King, who should have already been added at this point, to be quite honest, because he's somebody that does show up to Third Eye Comics occasionally. Warren Ellis, which I don't think I've ever seen do a signing. I've got Jolie Jones and Paul Denny. I think Denny's going to be at either Heroes or Baltimore this year as well. So, and then of course, what did I say? Frank Miller did the cover, and I'm hopefully Frank will do it right across the center here if I get another chance to get Frank. I mean, that's honestly, I got to get a Frank, and I may be almost done on this at this point. But that's been fun. It was a book I picked up in Third Eye Comics from one of their auctions. It was already signed by James Tinian. He's the only one on here that I didn't get myself. So I look forward to, and I don't feel bad about that because I obviously get James Tinian, like I was just saying, on other things. So we'll save that for future signings down the road. All right, moving on. Somebody I wasn't that familiar with, but I'll tell you, I think I'm going to be a fan of this guy because he was so excited about talking about some of the comics that he wrote and what we talked about here. And I'll show it to you. Jason Lansing. Somebody I'm really not that familiar with. Now, he's also signed the Marvel book, but he's also the writer or co-writer or creator on NYX From the Ashes right here. This is a book I wasn't all that, to be honest, impressed with. But I got issue number 1 of that, and I got this, I believe it's Derek Chu cover of Wolverine, of X-23 Wolverine Laura Kinney. I thought that was a spectacular cover right there. So I got him to sign those as well as the Marvel book. But the thing that I was kind of coolest about was getting to him to sign this only a couple weeks after the release of the Thunderbolts film. Thunderbolts #1 with another Terry Dodson, probably not one of my least favorite Terry Dodson covers, but Lansing signed it right here. And we got to talk about how cool it was to have the end scene from Thunderbolts with Bucky Barnes in this outfit from this book right here. And I said, hey, were you on the credits for the movie? And he said no, because that was filmed for the next movie. I think it's part of the Fantastic Four movie or Doomsday movie or something like that. Yeah. So he said during one of those movies, when we actually get to see that scene again, he'll have credits on that movie for helping create this version of Bucky at this point. But I got a couple copies of this sign, and I'll save this for Terry Dodson at this point, even though it's not one of my favorite Terry Dodsons at all, unlike those Princess Leia ones. But because Lansing signed this, I will definitely get Terry Dodson to sign it. And I went ahead and got issue number 2 as well. Again, actually, I like that one a little bit better. But issue 2 and maybe even that NYX #1, I probably wouldn't have gotten signed again if I had gotten Greg Capullo. That money, again, would have been directed to something much bigger than these books right here. But it's still pretty cool. It's cool to listen to him talk, especially to one of the other fans, about a Clayface book that he wrote and how excited he was about it. All right, I'm going to save that. Okay, another artist I ended up getting, but I only got, this is somebody I did cut back a little bit on. I did get in a Marvel book, but it's Ivan Coella, and he's been doing art. He'd also been doing art on Fantastic Four, and this is issue number 7, but it's also Legacy issue number 700, and you've got this great Alex Ross Doom cover right here. So Iban signed it right there, and again, he signed it also in my Marvel book. All right, next up was somebody else I only got one autograph from, well, one book signed, but I also got him in the Marvel book. And that was Julian Tadero. He's not somebody I'm really familiar with, but I know he's been doing the covers to the recent run on Catwoman. And it's somebody I might actually have to take a look at some of those covers. It was not somebody that jumped up on my radar until I realized he had done the cover to this right here, Daredevil #1. And this is of course, you saw this just a few episodes ago when I showed you Chip Zdarsky had signed it right there. And I honestly wasn't even thinking about it. I thought this was a Chichetto cover. I wasn't even thinking about it. But it's not. It's a Julian Tadero cover. And so you can see his autograph down there. So I got him to sign this, and I got him to sign the book. It's not somebody I had anything else on. I'm not reading the current run on Catwoman. But looking at some of the covers, they are actually pretty cool. And it's somebody, I might actually just pick up a few of those Catwoman covers just to have on hand. Some of them are actually pretty cool. And if I see him again, I may have to get another autograph from him. All right, moving on with somebody who's more classic. We remember Stephen Platt. Of course, those great, that Mark Spector Moon Knight books were fantastic. Well, I didn't have any of those books. In fact, I'd already sold some of those, so I didn't have that great Spider-Man cover. But I did have some more of his recent variant covers. We got Wolverine Revenge right here, and this beautiful saber-tooth Wolverine cover right there. And look at that bluish green pin just pops off of there. It's like glow in the dark. And even more was the issue of Wolverine #7. These are all brand new books, and it just pops off of there. That's fantastic stuff. He actually had a print of both of these, and I'll be honest, I kind of pulled back on the prints towards the end because I realized I had spent a lot of money on autographs, and it was like, I didn't need to get prints on everything, even though I did pick up a few from the show. All right, let's put these down. As I said, I got a lot of autographs. Philip Kennedy Johnson is somebody else that shows up at Third Eye Comics. In fact, Third Eye Comics is probably his hometown comic shop. He's local to Maryland. I have seen him down there, and then I actually missed a show. Well, a visit to Third Eye for Superman Day. He came that night. Of course, I had to work. I couldn't go to the show. I keep saying show. Couldn't go to the signing. I kind of wish I had, because I end up having to pay a lot more when I see these artists outside of Third Eye Comics. But I did get some Philip Kennedy Johnson books signed. And let's start with, of course, he's still continuing to write The Incredible Hulk. Some good stuff here. So I got a copy of that signed. I finally found my copy from my PC. I got that signed. He had been writing this. The only reason I picked up Hell Hunters is because he was writing it. I'm like, this has got to be pretty good. You've got a World War II Ghost Rider, and you got Bucky. You got Logan in there. Nick Fury. Good stuff there. That was a fun series. And of course, when Alien got bought by Disney, they were going to put out a comic book. So I got several books, Alien signed here, and they've got this one here. I think this is regular cover A. It's kind of hard to see. Oops, sorry. You see it up there at the top. And then we've got this one right here. I don't remember the artist on this. There was a reason I picked this one up. I want to say it was David Finch who possibly did this cover. Yeah, it's David Finch. That's the only reason I ended up getting this variant. And again, I wish he'd used silver. He kind of used the muted gold, but you can see it up there. And then the Ron Lim variant, I think it's the Walmart variant. And that one he used the silver, and it pops off of there really good. And then lastly was issue #3. And that one pops off of there pretty good in the black. It looks, in person, it looks, sorry about the glare. It jumps off pretty good on this. It would have been better in silver or white. But this right here is, I believe it's Adam Kubert. It's hard to see. It's one of the Kubert brothers did that right there. And that's kind of so much different than the regular stuff that they do. It's dark in here, and that you can't really pick it up. But it's a really great and scary cover. But that was from Philip Kennedy Johnson. And then we got some bigger names here, actually. Michael Golden is someone I've really liked. I don't like his price structures. As I said, if you were going to get books signed by Michael Golden, and you guys can let me know in the comment section what you think, I think there's only 5 books that you should get signed by Michael Golden, unless there's a personal reason for something else. But those include Marvel Fanfare, #1. You've got Micronauts #1, Micronauts #8. You've got the Nom #1. And then, of course, the big one is the Avengers Annual #10, the first appearance of Rogue. Well, what he does is he charges more for certain books. In fact, that annual, I think he's supposed to charge $40 for the annual. And in this case, I didn't have the original annual, but I did have some facsimiles. And I kind of got away with it because he didn't recognize it until he'd already given me a price on everything. But I'll show you what I got signed. Let's see here. Start off with the Nom #1. And let's look down there in the yellow. You can see his signature right there. And I ended up, I'd already gotten issue number 1 signed, but I had 2 really nice copies of issue number 8, and these both he signed pretty much in the same spot. And this, of course, is the first appearance of Captain Universe, and you can see his signature right there over there in the white. So I got 2 of those signed, and I'm looking to hopefully get those graded. And speaking of Micronauts, what did I say? Issue number 1, issue number 8. But unless you're something you really like, and there was 2 issues I really liked from my childhood in Micronauts, and that was issue number 5 featuring the Prometheus pit. And we talked about that a little bit, and I said there was something kind of cool about that. It actually made me look up, who's Prometheus? What is this? And I learned a little bit about Greek mythology because of that comic book. Well, the other was issue number 7, and it's mostly because of the cover. You got this great Man-Thing cover, and I recently just picked this up, and it's a personal favorite. And this is a book I'm not going to get graded, but it is super cool, and he signed it right there. And then lastly, what did I talk about? The big book, of course, was Avengers Annual number 10. Now, I didn't have any raw copies of a original number 10, but I did have some facsimiles that I planned to get the cover artist to sign, but I wanted Michael Golden on here, and I eventually will end up getting Chris Claremont as well, probably at Heroes Con or maybe in Baltimore. But I had a couple copies of the facsimile with this David Nakayama cover, and he signed it right up there. In fact, he signed it on both of these, right up there at the top. And he didn't quite recognize it until I started talking to him about this. He had actually signed a copy of this last year up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, or maybe it was Hershey. No, it was Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, for the 4th-state Comic-Con up there. And he charged me $40 for that. And I only got 1 autograph up there because I didn't plan on spending that much. Now, he only charged me $20 on these. And as I said, I'd already paid him. When I was telling him the story, I said, yeah, I'd gotten you to sign this back in August last year, but I said I was going to get David Nakayama, and I talked to him about David Nakayama. I wanted him to sign this, and how he had said, this is what Michael Golden said to me, was he wished Nakayama had done the version of Rogue that looked like Rogue from the comic book, not this young, sexy version that we have right here. And as soon as I brought that story up, he goes, oh, yeah, that was the annual. I was supposed to charge you $40. It's okay. Forget about it. He let it go. But, oh, come on, cat. Hop down. But, so I saved a whole $40 by not for saying anything ahead of that. But Michael Golden did sign all of these books for me. So that was pretty cool. All right. Now we got somebody I've never gotten before, and that is Bill Morrison. Bill Morrison was doing art for Bongo Comics. And sorry about that. The cat is attacking the stand down there. That's why you got that shake right there. But Bill Morrison was doing the Simpsons comics, the various Simpsons comics for Bongo Comics back in the day. So I grabbed a bunch of these because I'd never gotten these autographed before. So had some things in there, and then PC that were slated to maybe get inspected to be graded at some point. And that was issue number 1 of Simpsons Comics, the homage to Fantastic Four number 1. You can see Bill Morrison's autograph down there at the bottom. And I got a couple copies of that, as well as Simpsons Comics and Stories number 1. And you can see his autograph here. I'm going to zoom in. You can see his autograph right there. And I didn't have an issue of Bartman number 1, but I did have Bartman number 4. Of course, this is that homage to Spider-Man number 50 right here by Romita. That actually shows up really good. And then lastly is a copy of Treehouse of Horror number 1. And this is one of the last older books that I had picked up off of Whatnot. I'm currently in another hiatus off of Whatnot, except for dealers who deal in some of the brand new stuff that comes out from Unknown Comics. I've gotten away from even the dealers that I like, because I tried one of my favorite dealers one more time, and this book, oh, this looks great, this looks great. They go through and they show you everything. Go through and they they hold the book up and you look around the whole thing, you think it's really good, you think it's a 9.8 candidate, and you get this and you pay the money and it's not. You ended up with rounded corners, which are completely hard to see. There's a tick there that was hard to see. But I had sold this out of my PC. I had one of those early books I had gotten graded and sold, and it was no longer on my PC. And I did want it in my PC, but now I've got the signed version by Bill Morrison right there. And I thought that was pretty cool. It's somebody I had never met before. But that wasn't the only funny book type of artist that was there. There's somebody else from my childhood. In fact, when I was in junior high, it was one of my favorite books that came out from DC. And that was this right here. It is Captain Carrot and the Amazing Zoo Crew. And this is Scott Shaw, who I think he was doing the art and writing on this as well. And this is issue number 1. In fact, what's funny is I had whatever the first appearance was in one of the other books. It was one of those supplements that was put inside of another book, like Teen Titans or something like that. Blue Devil, maybe. I don't know. But I had that, and I never had issue 1, but I had issue 2 through most of that run. But it wasn't until recently I picked up an issue number 1. So I got Scott Shaw to sign that. You can see his signature up there underneath the trade dress. And then back in 2007, they brought it back, Captain Carrot and the final arc. And I got him to sign this too, but I made a huge mistake. And you can see his autograph right up there. But I made a huge mistake because sitting right next to him, and I had just gotten his autograph and I just showed it to you, was Bill Morrison. Well, Bill Morrison wrote this. And I'm like, you idiot. You idiot. But I'm going to have a chance to make good on this. That Bill Morrison's going to be down at Heroes Con this year, so I will take this book down there and make up for my mistake and get that signed as well. So I got home and I was looking at all these and I couldn't believe that I messed that up. All right, continuing on. I know this is a long video, guys. I hope you have enjoyed this so far. It's a lot of stuff, but Charles Soule was up there. Charles Soule was just at Third Eye, and I got a lot of books signed, a lot of his first issues for 8 Billion Genies. He signed some of those. Ryan Brand was there too. So they signed some of those 8 Billion Genies books. Lucky Devils had just come out, so I'd gotten some issue number 1 signed. But what didn't come out right then, but a week later from his appearance at Third Eye, was his new book, Daredevil, Cold Day in Hell. And I ended up getting him to sign that. Steve McNiven doing the artwork, so I got to track him down as well. But I got 3 copies of that sign, regular cover, as well as the Frank Miller cover right there. Soule signed it right there. I did get another Star Wars Free Comic Book Day. This is from a couple years ago, I believe. So Soule signed it right there. And then speaking of Lucky Devils, after his appearance, one of my fellow Third Eyers ended up going to another store and was able to find me a copy of Lucky Devils number 1. This is, I think, the 3rd print technically, but it is the Jenny Frison cover. And this will be going to Charlotte with me for Heroes Con here in the middle of June. By the time this video comes out, it probably will, the show have already been gone, and hopefully I'll have this signed by Jenny Frison by that point. And then the last thing I got Charles Soule to sign, and I will have to try to get Ron Garney to sign this at some point. I think he's going to be at Baltimore later in the year, is issue number 11. Right here, this is the first appearance of the Muse. It is a key comic right here. And of course, they used the Muse on the Daredevil Born Again TV series on DC Plus. DC? Did I say DC? Disney Plus. So he signed that. This is a grading candidate at this point, but I think I'm going to wait until I get Ron Garney to do that. Then I'll submit it at my leisure because I'll have to have it verified now that I don't have a witness for this right here. But that was it for Charles Soule. And I promise you guys, we are almost done. All right, one of the big names that I was really hoping to get there was Jim Salkrip. And he's one of the big editors at Marvel back in the day, back in the 80s. And I ended up getting him to sign 2 issues of Spider-Man. And it's issue number 93. And you're going to ask me, why is the book out of the bag and board? Well, I had started this many years ago. And I got to be a little bit careful here. But I'd been getting the creators. This is Craven's Last Hump, by the way, issue number 293. And as you can see right here, I've got multiple creators down here. And in fact, I've got Michael Zeck, I've got Bob McLeod, and J.M. DeMatteis. I always butcher all these guys' names. But Jim Salkrop actually did the editing. He was the editor at the time, so he signed up here. And I'll tell you who else I need on here at this point. I do need to get Rick Parker, who's going to be at HeroesCon, and Jim Shooter, who's the editor-in-chief. And Janet Jackson is the colorist. I don't think that's the Michael Jackson's sister, Janet Jackson, but somebody I don't really know. But getting very close to getting this completed, but this is not a grading candidate because I want to see the autographs. But I got that issue and issue 294 the same way. See, everybody signed down at the bottom, and then Jim Salkrop signed up here at the top. And it's the same creative team on both of these. Michael Zeck, Bob McLeod, J.M. DeMatteis. Still need... Oh, now this is more interesting. So between these two issues, Rick Parker's still on there. Janet Jackson's still the colorist. Salkrop is the editor, so that I got him. But the editor-in-chief changed between these two issues. And this one, I've actually got to get Tom DeFalco on instead of Jim Shooter. So in between those two issues, the editor-in-chief changed at Marvel. I think that was very interesting. And then speaking of Craven's Last Hunt, a couple years ago, they came out with the Marvel's Greatest Creators line. These are facsimiles, mostly, but you got these special branding at the top. They did it on a lot of facsimiles. It wasn't just a straight facsimile, but this was celebrating the creators, Matteis and Zeck. And this is a complete shit show right here. And it's hard to see. Just take a look. Look between all the webs and all the gold paint pens. It's hard to tell you, but you can definitely see I got Jim Salkrop to sign up here at the top. What you've got here is you've got Mike Zeck, Matteis, McLeod, and Rick Parker actually signed this. This is probably, I think I got this signed back in 2019, to be honest with you. Because Mike Zeck I haven't seen in years, so it had to be back before COVID. But I still need to get Jim Shooter on here at some point to basically complete this one. And it is a complete shit show. In person, you can turn it like this and you can see the signatures shine a little bit because it is gold paint pen. Anyway, there's that one. And then the last thing I got, well, I got Salkrop to sign the Silver Age or the Marvel book, but he also signed this, A Lady Rawhide #3. He was the editor-in-chief at Topps at this time. And I'd already gotten this great Adam Hughes book signed years ago by Adam Hughes because I was using silver paint pens at the time. So I've had this for years. In the last few years, I'd gotten Jimmy Palminotti to sign as well. He did some work in here. There's Jim Salkrop. He said, "Do you want me to sign on her butt?" And I was like, sure, why not? So he signed on her butt. And then the signature right here. This is, and I'm going to butcher this, and I wrote it down. Let me see if I can actually pronounce this. It is Renee Witterstetter. I don't know if I pronounced that right. She was an editor there at Marvel for a lot of years, and she was the editor on this. While Salkrop was the editor-in-chief, she was the editor on this book. So I went ahead and got her to sign this. And I'd hoped to have had that great, one of those great books from the last part of the John Byrne run on She-Hulk back in the day when he came back and took over the book again. Renee was the editor on those books at the time. Of course, we got some of those famous ones where you have She-Hulk being naked and having to jump rope. You've got her doing the Vanity Fair pregnant cover. But one of the covers on there actually featured Renee on the cover, and that is this right here. And let me see if I can pull back and you guys can see it. This is a print. I bought a nice 11x17 print, and that's Renee right here being part of the storyline. Of course, you got John Byrne up there as well. And I thought that was so cool. And she had a lot of different prints from a lot of She-Hulk books and other books she had worked on. And I had already dropped She-Hulk by this point. I didn't actually pick up any of that late run of She-Hulk until issue number 50. And so I missed out on some of these great John Byrne stories. I'd never actually picked them up ever, including this one. I do not have this in my PC, but I thought this was kind of cool to get this print with, because it actually features her on there. It's not just her being an editor on the book. So I thought that was pretty cool. That'll have to go up here on the wall for at least a little bit. That's to me, that's a kind of a cool thing. But she also signed the Marvel book as well. All right, guys, I know you've hung in there for the long time. I'm looking at the time on the video, and it's been a long day. So we'll try to wrap this up with the last of the autographs. And that was Mark Morales, the legendary inker at Marvel. He's done so much stuff over the last 2 or 3 decades. Well, I had a couple books that Jason Aaron had signed that I had gotten artists to sign at some CGC signings. I cracked the books out of those graded slabs. I was intending to get Jason Aaron on the books, but then I realized Mark Morales did the inking on both of these. And so I said, well, I'm not going to get these graded anytime soon. Let's go ahead and add Morales on there. So I'll have 3 autographs on each of these books. And that is, I believe this is the Heroes Reborn number... I never can remember which one this is. It doesn't really matter. It's Heroes Reborn. It's part of that Jason Aaron story, the alternate storyline with Squadron Supreme in charge. You've got Heroes Reborn and Heroes Return. I never can remember which one this is, but I didn't care because this Patrick Gleason cover was amazing, and that's why I ended up sending this in to the Patrick Gleason signing about a year or so ago. And it's really hard. He picked poorly this gold paint pen right there that was not throwing ink. So I wasn't entirely happy with that. But Mark Morales just today signed this right there, down there. And as you can see right there is the Jason Aaron autograph. And that's a book that will go back into CGC. As well as this one right here, although I'm going to have to clean it up because I messed it up a little bit. This is from Heroes Reborn number 1, the Art Germ cover. You got this beautiful Power Princess cover. It looks just like Wonder Woman. And I had sent it into Art Germ right there, and he'd signed right there. And then I took it to Third Eye, got Jason Aaron to sign it there. And then I added Mark Morales down here at the bottom. I messed it up a little bit because I ended up kind of smearing that. I'm going to see if I can clean it up. If not, I may just end up deciding not to get this graded again and just keep it as a raw as part of the PC. But we'll see how that goes. But guys, that was it for all the autographs that I got signed. It was a ton of stuff, and I know I've been going on for a long time here. Who knows? I may have to break up this show into 2 different segments because I have gone on so long. But you asked me, I went to a comic book show. Did you actually buy any comic books? Well, I'm sitting here looking and I'm going, well, I did buy 1 comic book, but before I do that, because I just reached in the box and I realized I wasn't finished yet, I have got 1 more comic book for you. And that is from Larry Houston. Larry Houston is the director from the original X-Men animated show. And I got him to sign the Marvel book. No big deal. I actually got him to sign this print right here with the X-Men, from the animated show, and you've got Larry Houston down here, and he actually wrote director, because sometimes he's the director, sometimes he's a writer, and I actually got the very last print he had of this at the show, and that's going to look really cool up there on the wall. But I actually did get a comic book sign from him. He was the creator of the Vanguards back in, I think, 182. Here's Charlton Bullseye. This is issue number 4, introducing the Vanguards, and it really is some interesting artwork. I told him, I said, at least in the cover, I could see a little bit of John Byrne in his artwork here, but yeah, it was something he wrote, illustrated. In fact, he says he's even got an option to possibly option this storyline, these characters. So that should be interesting. But he was somebody that I'd never met before, and he was really excited about talking about the show, and he's a big fan of the X-Men, and just you kind of love that enthusiasm about being a creator or a comic creator, director, whatever it is in this industry. And that was super cool. And that's one of the reasons I went ahead and bought the print. Otherwise, I probably would have just got him to sign the book and this. But I went ahead and spent the extra money to get the print and to get him to sign that as well. But that leaves us with, what did I tell you I was going to end up with? What did you buy? Well, I found a lot of stuff there. I felt like the prices were really high, but I also know I spent a lot of money on autographs, and I wasn't willing to spend a big amount of money on really good keys. I just wasn't feeling it. I took a look around a few things. You did definitely saw some of those new Battle Beast blind bags that people were trying to push for $10 and $20 a piece. I just passed on all that. But I did find one dealer, and I felt like I overpaid for this, but not by a tremendous amount. And I bought it mostly because I'm going to hopefully get David Finch to sign this at Heroes Con. It is a nice key comic, and I've been wanting it for some time. So I went ahead and spent, even though I felt like it was a little bit more than I should have, I ended up buying Action Comics $8.94, the first appearance of Death in DC Continuity, not part of the Vertigo line or anything like that. And you've got this great cover by David Finch right there. And that's the money shot right there. It's the David Finch cover really more than anything. So, and guys, that is it. That is all I ended up buying. I spent way too much money on autographs and I ended up buying this comic book that I hope to get signed as well. And that was it, guys. I had a great time. I would recommend checking out the Fan Expo in Philly the next time it comes around next year. I'm sure all the other Fan Expos will run pretty much the same way. They seem like they have a lot of great creators at all of these. And I'm just, again, disappointed that Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo weren't there. But it is what it is. I still had a great time. And hopefully we'll see Capullo at a later date, someplace down the line. I know I'll see Snyder again. He's coming back to Third Eye pretty soon, so I'll have some more books for him to sign. And that is it, guys. Definitely leave me a comment in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about all the books I got got signed. Just let me know. I'd love to hear from you. All right, guys, I'm out of here. I'm exhausted. I will see you for the next show. Just remember, every comic has a story.